Hello, I am the Showpal Guy, and welcome to Yu-Gi-Oh! Stories, to which I tell the stories and experiences of players within the Yu-Gi-Oh! Community. And today's story is something that I deeply resonate with, and something that I can connect with, and that's the bad player experiences. We all have dealt with this, anti-meta players. Now, there's nothing wrong playing anti-meta, but being an anti-meta player certainly has a certain caveat to it in the sense that if you are playing an anti-meta deck, you're most likely this type of person. You're most likely player A. If you're playing, it's kind of like how some decks have this like stereotype or this identity that goes along with playing with the deck here. For instance, if you play Hero, you definitely are a fan of My Hero Academia, or if you're a player who plays Trickstar, then you're definitely a person who loves to see the world burn, and you enjoy the heck seeing your opponent just whittle down their life points and laugh at them in their faces because you think that, oh, burning them for damages of going to the battle phase is really darn funny. That is what I'm talking about here. Or if you are a Cyber Dragons player, you're still stuck in the mindset that Powerball limit removal is super awesome when you boost your monster up to 10k, and in reality, when you do that, I know in your mind you're thinking like, "Oh my gosh, this is totally amazing, totally awesome, wow!" But the person you're playing against doesn't think it's all that amazing or all that interesting, and so that's how I perceive also anti-meta players in the sense that a lot of anti-meta players have this idea that okay, I do not care about interacting with my opponents. I don't care if my opponent's having fun. I don't care about having a back and forth game. I don't even care about having an enjoyable experience for my opponent or even having a good game of Yu-Gi-Oh! All I care about is making a deck to which my opponent can just not have fun and they take enjoyment off tilting you. So here's a story here I found from Reddit concerning anti-meta players. My bad player experiences are usually against the ones who brag constantly about how amazing their deck is or the boards they make and being the worst sore losers when they lose. In person at my locals, we had this one player who played Mystic Mind slash anti-meta and would go on and on about how much of a cancer his deck was and try to shove it in our faces about how he would go about countering our decks if we face each other. Usually, by the time the tournament reached the halfway point, this player would go 0-2 and make excuses how he just had bad matchups. As for online, my favorite player was going against the player on YGO Pro who played a talker deck. We went first, and from what I could gather, the deck is played around using almost all the resources of link money. Like if you play talkers, you essentially know how it goes. You're just link spamming. I believe code talkers use too many resources in order to get to where they need, kind of like DDDs. But you know what? That's here there. So some of these talker monsters to create an extra link, they usually end in Avermax, along with like the wizard monster that will give you a negate based on how the monsters are arranged. So links up like code talker involves a high level skill, but at the same time, like it's a very uninteractive deck that really doesn't care what your opponent is doing because you pretty much got your set game plan ready. All right. When he finally ended his long turn, he was bragging about his board couldn't be broken and that I couldn't do anything. Did you know that code talker boards are impossible to defeat? Wow, it's like Mystic Mind with like 3 back row. How could you ever defeat that? After all of his moves, he ended up leaving one main monster zone free, which was enough for me because I play Dinos. I ended up having Lost World, Dolka, and UTC on board, and when I attack with UTC, he tried to use Avermax effect, but I negated with Dolka, and did the same thing again when he tried to use the effect from the graveyard. Immediately after that, he rage quit, and wrote in the comments how that match didn't count because he wasn't paying attention to what I was doing. You weren't paying attention. That's why you lost. And this scenario has happened multiple times in duels. Everyone can say this. There's like Yu-Gi-Oh players when it's not their turn, or if they're a combo-oriented deck player and it's not their turn. After the 15-second mark, they have a weird tendency of just dozing off. This has happened to me where I'm playing my deck and I look at my opponent on the other side and I can tell they're just checked out. They're just checked out, even to the point where like, you know what? I'm gonna just cheat here. I'll just cheat here, activate some effects I can't activate, do some illegal plays. You know why? Because you're not paying attention. Whose fault is it? Your fault. Because you're too busy thinking about how awesome or how cool or how much of a unique individual you are with your deck that you're not even paying attention to what your opponent even is doing. You're playing your Mystic Mind deck thinking that you're some genius. Oh, wow, look at me, I'm playing Mystic Mind. I'm so out there. Now, being somebody who has played Mystic Mind in a tournament, I can safely say that when we Mind players, when we play this card, we don't want you to enjoy the game. We don't want you to enjoy the game. But then again, that's competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! In a nutshell, right? Competitive Yu-Gi-Oh! Making your opponent not play the game, making them not enjoy it. That's how it is. But at the same time, though, if you are constantly bragging about your deck, which I never did that. I never bragged about how awesome my deck is unless it's like completely me being ironic. If you're the type of person who brags about their deck and then you don't pay attention to your opponent and you in your own head, you're playing mental gymnastics to yourself, saying how awesome, how unique, or how original your deck is, I'm sorry, but you suck. Face the facts, brother or sister. You're not good. And that leads to another story here, where I found this post where someone says, does anyone else have to deal with those players? Those people in quotation marks. The post starts off with saying, you know who I'm talking about. The ones who haven't played the game in years. And as you try to get them caught up in the game and they tell you things like, oh yeah, I used to destroy people with my Exodia deck. I'll replace the Exodia part here. Side note here. Isn't this like DM stuff? This has happened throughout all of Yu-Gi-Oh! It doesn't matter if you're who played GOAT format in 2005. It doesn't matter if you're a player who played in 2011. It doesn't matter if you played in 2015, 2017, 2009, 2012. It doesn't matter what time period of Yu-Gi-Oh! That you were really invested in. Everyone, and I mean everyone, has said this line. Every returning player. Oh yeah, I used to destroy people with my blank deck. I used to destroy people with my Teledad deck. I used to destroy people with my like Monarch deck. I used to destroy people with my DD deck. I used to destroy people with my what's some like oh yeah, like Fire Fist. Yeah, I used to destroy people with Fire Fist. Oh man, I'm like an OG. You hear that all the time. People calling themselves, oh man, I'm an OG. I play old school Yu-Gi-Oh! Old school. How old school? Bruh. Synchro summoning in XCs. Yeah, that's how old school I am. It's not just DM players who say this. Everyone has said this. Everyone. So back to the post. No one would play against me. It goes back to the type of person. The same person who's be like, oh man, I used to squash everybody in my locals, would also be like, people are afraid of me, or people wouldn't want to play against me, or like, oh dude, my deck back then would destroy everyone's deck nowadays. You can't beat the OGs. Yeah. And then they're introduced to something called hand traps. And that toxicity, that person who came in being like, yeah man, I'm tough, I'm awesome, I'm great, goes off the window. Just leaves. Reminds me of a time actually when I played basketball. So I played basketball, and there was this kid who believed he was like really darn good. He believed he was really darn good because he could do things that no one else can do, and like he genuinely thought that, all right, like I could do this, like I could beat everyone, like I'm smart, I'm talented, like you know how it is. Like basketball players and Yu-Gi-Oh players are somewhat kind of similar if they're like returning or the beginners or there's someone who used to kick butt in their own area. They believe that they have this like weird main character syndrome. That's what they call it, main character syndrome, where they believe like the world revolves around them. They're the destroyers, like they're the LeBron James, they're the Michael Jordan. Like there's a lot of Yu-Gi-Oh players who want to be like Jesse Cotton and talk about how they're like Jesse Cotton, or talk about how, you know, oh man, they dominated this one person online, or they kicked butts like 7 years ago against this one other player that in their mind was good but actually was like really bad. This happens all the time. Happens all the time. And then this post over here was then led towards another post that said, Last week, a bunch of guys came to my locals looking for trades, as well as play. However, these guys had the worst decks you can imagine. I mean, they think you must only play one of each card, and we're running a bunch of cards that don't work together. Below that, I had a guy come to locals, bringing their 60 card stall Blue Eyes deck. That same 60 card stall Blue Eyes player is the same type of player that would go be like, oh man, Yu-Gi-Oh was really good back then. Or like, I like Mystic Mine. It's fun. Or, you know, the 60 card style Blue Eyes player would also be the same person who's like, I like Code Talkers. It's so fun, but they turn off their brain when it's like their opponent's turn. Or even if they're playing any combo deck. It's like, yeah, man, I love you on their turn, but when it's their opponent's turn, 15 seconds in, they tap out. They tap out. So, if there's anything you learn from watching this video or listening to me, please, oh please, if you're the type of person to go and trash talk, don't embarrass yourself and lose. Just don't do that. If you are as good as you believe you are, you shouldn't be a sore loser than when you lose. You know why? Because now you have room for improvement. You can become better. It should be exciting. Honestly, if you lose a game, it just speaks to me like, okay, there's some things I can work on here. Oh, there are some things I haven't thought of that I can like add to my deck. If you take an L, take an L. If you brag and you take an L, you gotta take a knee, brother or sister. You gotta take a knee because oh boy, like players like you guys, y'all a dime a dozen. Y'all think you're built differently, but you're a dime a dozen. Thank you for watching the video / listening to me. Feel free to hit like and subscribe if you want to. You totally don't have to if you don't want to do so, but it'd be really cool if you did. And so until next time, see you guys later for more Yu-Gi-Oh stories.